All right, it is after 2, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to our very first RHP public event since our launch last September. So congratulate yourselves on being the first ones to come to our event. We're very excited to have you all here today to learn about a really exciting topic that's very relevant to Kansas City today. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Hannah Mitchell. I'm the Regional Housing Program Manager at Mid-America Regional Council. We are the co-backbone agency of the Regional Housing Partnership, along with LISC of the Greater Kansas City. My counterpart, Carly Turner, is back there waving. And so we, our two organizations, lead the work of the RHP along with all of our great partners across the region. So like I said, this is our very first event for the RHP. This is also the kickoff event for what we're calling the Housing Policy Innovation Series. And so the focus of this event is just to bring forth innovative, creative ideas of how folks in the Kansas City region and across the country are approaching housing challenges in their cities. And so we're hoping to equip our policymakers, elected officials, city staff, and community members with the resources and knowledge necessary to be able to figure out what works best for their community and hopefully implement some of these strategies across the region. So we're kicking off the series today. Oh, that's just moving right along. So I didn't even see that. Spoiler alert. So we are kicking off the series today, but this is going to be a quarterly series. So we have 3 other events after today's event in May, August, and November. I think this might be the wrong, hold on. No, it's not. Why is it on a timer? Of course, this didn't happen in the 2 hours we were here before. It just happens right now. Give me just a second. If you want to. Okay, so, and as of today, we have announced that the May session, we don't have a date nailed down quite yet, but the May session is going to focus on modular and prefab homes. So something that is happening in Kansas City is really exciting. There's a lot of support behind in really creative ways that folks are using this across the region. So definitely stay on the lookout for those invites to come out soon for future dates. I also want to talk a little bit about the Regional Housing Partnership. Maybe some of you were at our launch event last fall, or you know about the partnership from the last few years, that the work has been going on behind the scenes. But maybe some of you were just forwarded this event today and you have no idea of the context of what this is. So the Regional Housing Partnership is a collective impact initiative really focused around building a strong and connected housing system in the Kansas City region. So that collective impact part really means just bringing together diverse stakeholders to solve a large, complex social issue such as housing, right? And so through the Regional Housing Partnership, we hope to strengthen the network that is already existent in the Kansas City region and also identify gaps where maybe there's opportunity for growth or for new services that haven't been offered before, or new programs, new policies that we can implement to improve the housing situation across the region. So that is the long and short of it. If you want to talk more about the RHP and what that is, come find me or Carly after the event. We're happy to chat with you about it. You can also scan this QR code and make sure that you're on our mailing list. If you scan this, you can also have an opportunity to sign up for one of our action and impact groups, which are kind of our focus areas of the RHP that are going to be doing events like this one. This is a part of our policy and process group. And we'll have, lots more events coming this year and in the future. Okay, so we do have some upcoming events for the RHP. Like I said, this is our initial event. We do have one 2 weeks from today at just about the same time. So we're really excited to have Caroline Souza, who is an architect and principal at David Baker Architects out in San Francisco. She is going to be in the area and has given us the incredible opportunity to get to listen to her speak about her firm's book, 9 Ways to Make Housing for People. And so that event is going to be, again, 2 weeks from today at AIAKC downtown. And we're also going to have a facilitated conversation led by Lauren Harness of the Kansas City Design Center. She's also on our RHP Regional Housing Partnership Coordinating Council, and she's going to lead us in a discussion that we're hoping to be really interactive and involved focused around how we can apply these principles to Kansas City. So definitely would love to have you all join us for that. There is limited spots available, but it is free registration, so just be sure to register for that if you're interested. We also have a housing construction workforce forum that our workforce work group has been working to put together. It's going to be on Friday, May 1st. We don't have the registration out quite yet, but be on the lookout for that. Coming soon. Mark your calendars, 9:30 to 11:30 over in the West Bottoms in Kansas City, Missouri. And then finally, following our program today, the Kansas City section of the American Planning Association is hosting a happy hour over at Vine Street Brewing, which is over in the 18th and Vine district, just up the road a little ways. So we would love to invite you all to come to that. You do not have to be an APA member to join the happy hour today. It'll be a great opportunity. Some of our presenters from today are going to be there, and we don't want these conversations just to stay in the room today. We want people to talk about them, have opportunities for networking, and think about creative ways that we can implement these in our own cities across the region. And so that'll be a great opportunity for more informal connection and to ask your questions if you don't get a chance to ask them today. All right, so finally, I'm going to shift our focus to today's event, which is on pre-approved building plans. Hopefully, you all knew what you were walking into here. We have a great lineup for you today. We have a keynote presentation by Matthew Petty, who I will introduce here in a minute. He's going to give us kind of a pre-approved plans 101. This is the work that he does partnering with cities day in and day out, and so going to give us a great overview of what that work looks like. And how we might apply it to Kansas City. We're then going to have some city spotlights of 3 cities that are in different stages of implementing these kinds of programs in their cities. So we have representatives from Kansas City, Missouri, Overland Park, Kansas, and Claremore, Oklahoma here to talk about what their programs look like. So you can see it kind of in action. After that, we're going to have a panel discussion with all 4 of those presenters, and I've got some great questions that I've been wanting to ask them for a while to kick our conversation off, and then we'll open it up to you all. So if you are sitting in the presentation today and you're thinking of questions, please write those down, and we'll hopefully have an opportunity for you to ask them at the end. All right, so without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to Matthew Petty, the co-founder and CEO of Pattern Zones Co. Matthew is a selective practitioner driven to make an impact. He specializes in contemporary municipal best practices, and his passion is helping cities make it easier to build good housing. Matthew has facilitated or consulted for municipalities and civic organizations in more than 24 communities, including our very own Overland Park, Memphis, South Bend, Orlando, Salt Lake City, Houston, and others. He was elected 4 times and served for nearly 13 years as a council member just down the road in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he sponsored new database processes and placemaking frameworks in transportation and tourism budgets. Matthew's planning and design proposals have won grants from the National Endowment for the Arts 4 times, the Knight Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and others. Congress for the New Urbanism awarded national honors to his work pioneering pre-approved building programs. Will you all join me in welcoming Matthew Petty to the stage?
What a lovely introduction. Who wrote that? It's great to be here. I love being with my people. I love talking about this topic, but when I say being with my people, I guess there aren't many people, if you're at a party and you went up to them and say, hey, let's talk about building permitting, would be excited. But I have a sense almost everybody in the room is inside that Venn diagram with one circle that's just us. This is going to be a fun conversation. I do think permitting is fun to talk about because there's a lot of impact we can make if we approve it. The reason I decided to focus this time in my career on pre-approved building programs, and we've been working on these literally for 10 years now, we started our first one 10 years ago, is because in my time on the city council, one of the things I realized is whether it's housing or transportation or any of the other super complex issues we have to deal with inside City Hall, permitting was one that we had a lot of control over. You know, we didn't have control over interest rates. We didn't have a whole lot of control over labor markets and improving those sorts of things, and all those are super complicated problems. The city, the towns have a role, but when it comes to permitting, they have a lot more direct control over how permitting works, and it's one of the ways that we could make a difference. We have to make a difference in a lot of ways to solve the housing challenges. Pre-approved building programs aren't an affordability program on their own, but they should be part of an approach to affordability. They can help make up some of the margins, but if your goal and the reason you came today is to see how pre-approved building plans might be a silver bullet for housing challenges or affordability, they're not. I got to level with you right up front, but they can make a big difference, and we'll talk about that today. The presentation is supposed to take about 35 or 40 minutes, so I don't want to linger, but I do want to get us started on some of the theory about what we think pre-approved building programs can do, how they fit in, and why they might work. And we start with a series of these diagrams. There are 4 of these, and you look at this, these are 4 blocks. This is the average density of a neighborhood in America. Okay, the average density of a neighborhood in America is 3 units per acre. And if you draw a random circle around a random place in your community, you're probably going to find some place that looks something like this. Even in large cities, you find a lot of districts, right, a lot of neighborhoods that fit this kind of format. And we have this idea that the way development happens, the way redevelopment happens, is that it happens all at once, that it comes really fast, that we get a master plan done and then it just slams into us. And that's what people have a fear of whenever we talk about how communities need to change and how we need to grow and adapt to the future. But what we see is that actually communities, neighborhoods in general, most neighborhoods grow a lot more slowly than that. Between the first diagram and the second diagram, you would expect 5 to 6 years to pass by in most places. Most places are not so hot of a real estate market that things flip all of a sudden. Most places grow a little bit more slowly, really at the scale, at the speed of what individuals are willing to do. Every one of these projects takes somebody, a team, and if these projects are done by locals, if they're done by people who are not professional builders and developers, it can take even more time. You might look at this and you might say, here's another 5 years. We're at about 10 years total. But when all this stuff happens, it all adds up. It really does make an incredible difference. You can support public improvements, you can support neighborhood commercial. And the difference between the first slide and this fourth slide is there are 6 times as many homes for people to live in the exact same amount of space, with the exact same infrastructure outlay. And if you paid really close attention, you'll notice in this illustration, we were able to fit 6 times as many homes for people without tearing down any for the illustration. And I would also say, if you imagine yourself at the pedestrian's eye view, or somebody driving through this neighborhood, somebody who lives or works here, this neighborhood 20 years later still feels familiar. It doesn't feel like a totally different neighborhood. It feels like a neighborhood that has changed, but one that you still recognize. And we might call this, something like a unified theory of incremental development and how incremental development happens. And we start the talk this way because this is different than large-scale development. And I don't mean to say that large-scale development doesn't have a place. Most cities, most towns need some of that to punctuate the urban fabric. But incremental development also has a place. And in fact, we have maybe not given it as much credit as we should have for one simple reason. We hear this all the time. When we're talking about accessory dwelling units, new cottages in our backyards or in our side yards, when we're talking about new townhomes, when we're talking about small walk-up apartment buildings, even if they still look like a house and feel like a house on the street, when we talk about these things as planners and people who are really concerned with best practices, as elected leaders who really want to get something good done, lots of times we hear this. Well, if those are such good ideas, how come other people aren't doing it all the time? I hate this question. I hate it. It just really gets me going. Because this is like planning where to build a bridge across a river by looking to see where people are already swimming across every day. Like, we're smarter than that, right? We can figure out if there's a demand for something, right? We can figure out if there's demand to put in telecommunications infrastructure or streets and pipes. And we can also figure out if there's demand for one-bedroom apartments or for backyard cottages or any of the other things in the missing middle scale of housing development that we say we want and that we love. So I want to reframe this question. Let's just turn it around into something that's a little more productive. And maybe you can do this yourselves in your communities when this question comes up in your conversations. Let's just reframe it to something we can actually start to unpack, something we can start to answer. Now, this is why do houses get built when other building types are encouraged? Okay, I'm calling out houses here. We're going to talk a lot about housing and houses, but I frame this question around houses because houses do still get built, right? Subdivisions still go up. We still see the rare renovation. We still see some places, some vacant lots get developed in one-off projects. But mostly we see single-family houses still done out in subdivisions. And we also see a lot of apartment buildings. Well, the reason we see both ends of those scales, houses and apartment buildings, but usually not that other stuff, is because, well, a lot of reasons. It's easier to get a loan like that. You can basically walk into a bank, and if you've got the forms filled out right and you've got the right credit, you can get a loan to do a house, and you can get a loan to do an apartment building or a strip mall or climate-controlled storage. There's a product at the bank for all those real estate types, but there's not a product really for duplexes. It's harder. And it's not just banks. I mean, are there any bankers in the room? Raise your hand. One banker. I'm sorry, I might pick on bankers a little bit, but I think you're a good sport. It's not just bankers. Right? Bankers are just one of the ways. They're in a system that doesn't support the kind of incremental infill that we're talking about. And lots of times it's not just that. This is a diagram we show to talk about a lesson we learned, one that I learned personally in my time as city council. A lot of my colleagues have learned this lesson as well. When I started on city council, I was 24. I was really earnest, right? I wanted to make a huge difference. And I had this theory of change when it came to housing and land use. My theory was the laws were wrong, change the laws, make them good, the rest will fall into place. You know? We're done. That was hard. It was so hard to change the laws. We were very proud when we did change the laws. We thought it would really do a good job. And even, you know, like how many times have you been through a master planning process and then at the end there's like the reveal, the curtain slides back and there it is, the watercolor, you know, the watercolor master plan image, and now everybody knows that's what we're doing. The laws have been changed, that's what's going to happen. Some people are afraid of it, a lot of us are excited about it. We all know this story. But what we observed is that it just wasn't enough. We would change the laws, we would make things allowed, the kinds of developments, the kinds of small-scale commercial and small-scale housing that we said we wanted. We would change the laws, but it still wouldn't happen. We'd made it allowed. All the developers and builders told us it was marketable, that they could get the sales and the rents to do the projects through the private sector, so how come it wasn't working? Well, in Fayetteville, and there's an example of this almost everywhere, in Fayetteville we have what we started to call the lot split loophole. And it just said if you could find a piece of property that let you do a lot split and you kept the project under the thresholds, then you didn't have to do civil engineering and tree preservation and so on and so forth. You could file the building permit literally with a napkin sketch if that's what you needed to do, and we'd work with you if you were under the lot split loophole. So everybody did that. Anybody who had a piece of property where they were making a choice between doing a fourplex or the lot split loophole, just slam that easy button right away. Not even thinking about it. Boom, I'll get the permit. Boom, I'll get the permit. Okay, lot split loophole over and over. We realized that you have to make the kinds of things that you want, you have to make it at least as easy as the kinds of things you don't want. Like, let's at least level the playing field, and in reality, let's be real, you have to make it easier to do the things you want than the kinds of development patterns you don't want. It has to be legitimately easier. That's the idea of pre-approved building programs. That's what we're trying to do. We'll talk more about this idea of friction in the permitting process and how do you lower the friction. It's a great tool or framework to think through these things. We got started trying to figure that out. This is an image from a project in South Bend. We ran through the same process in Overland Park, actually. It's how Overland Park got started. What we did is we pulled everybody into a room, the city and county planners, and kindergarten craft hour, scissors, glue sticks, construction paper, literally, you see it there on the table. They had building footprints, and they had pro formas based on interviews we'd done with local builders and property managers to understand what prevailing rents were, what prevailing construction rates were, and so on and so forth. And they tried to figure out how to make a project work with their codes. How to make a project pencil out so that a bank would lend on it with their codes. And of the 30 things that we pinned up, none of them worked. And they found out for themselves. We didn't tell them none of them worked. They ran the numbers and they could see their codes were keeping projects from happening. So this kicked off a whole round of stuff. South Bend has a pre-approved building program now. They've done a whole bunch of code updates. The biggest thing that they did, the number one lesson in my opinion out of South Bend, is there was a group of locals who were interested in doing neighborhood level projects in their own neighborhoods, and they started getting together once a month. They became a community of practice for themselves. They advocate to the city as a group, and they're respectful about it. It's changed the dynamics in South Bend. Now the city and the local developers are in partnership. They help each other. They come back and they change the codes when something's not going to work out, when it's keeping infill from happening. And it's because they have this principle of calibrating their codes actively and recalibrating every time there's a way to make it better for the kind of development that they want. Let's look at a few of those. These images come from a book we did. We published it last March for the state of Ohio. I'll show you a link in a minute. You can go download it. We were asked to pull together a pattern book that would help cities and towns in Ohio launch their own pre-approved building programs. And one of the questions that we were asked to help answer is, what are the minimum amount of zoning changes you really just have to make a pre-approved building program work really well? Just what would really make a pre-approved building program work great? And this is an important question because, hey, technically, in almost every state, Missouri, Kansas are no exception, your building official, unless you change the state law on how it applies locally, your local building official has a unilateral authority to issue phased approvals for building permits, which means any building plan that walks in the door, no matter what it looks like, no matter how it fits the street, no matter whether it conforms to any of the master planning stuff that you're going on, they don't have to consult with anyone, not the council, not you. They can start up a pre-approved building program. And in fact, by any other name, if we just forget the name, a lot of you in your cities and towns are actually probably already doing this. We call it approval by affidavit. A subdivision developer walks in with a 3-ring binder of building plans, A, B, and C. They say, get these reviewed, and I'll swear every building I build in this project will conform exactly with the plans you reviewed, so you don't have to review it another 200 times. And we're eager to do that. It just makes sense, right? When we talk about pre-approved building programs, we're talking about how to do it at scale across the entire city, all those diverse conditions, all those diverse owners, all the diverse builders. It's similar, but it's a little bit different than that. And so some of the rules need to change. Kansas City has done a great job with the historic parcels, historic plats, getting access to a lot of these common sense rules. The first one on the screen is just, look, if you're not going to allow projects on small pieces of land, if you're going to make every piece of land that has a project on it, if you're going to require it to be big, okay, you're already cutting your impact in half. If your minimum lot size is 10,000 feet and you can change it to 5,000 feet, you have effectively doubled your capacity for home ownership opportunities in your city with one policy change. Right? That's the difference here. And it makes difference in physical space. Suburban standards applied to a small lot make it so that it's unbuildable. Entirely unbuildable. Right? It's you could say it's like a brownfield lot, but it's administrative contamination instead of environmental contamination. And it needs remediation, right? But luckily it's less expensive to remediate the policies than it is to remediate environmental contamination. There's a great example of this out of Kalamazoo. They had, in their legacy code, they fixed this, they did a great job fixing this, but in their legacy code, they had a rule where even though historic multifamily patterns were allowed everywhere in their zoning code, they had a rule that came later that said if you're building if you're building a multifamily project, which is like even a triplex, even 3 units just counts as multifamily, then you have to have a 25-foot side yard setback on both sides, okay? And every single lot was 50 feet wide. So we'll take 25 feet from this side and 25 feet from the other, and we'll figure out how to build in the 4th dimension, right? That was the theory, the Kalamazoo theory. And they were like, not they as a city, but as a bureaucracy, there were people who were very proud of that. Because what they would do is they would just say, okay, that's a problem, but we'll just get rid of the parcel, and the tax books will be clean. We'll just give half of that land to the one next door and half to the one next to it. We had to acquire it because it was unbuildable. We put it in the land bank. We're in charge of it now, and we've got a clean solution. And so they did that hundreds of times. And every time they did it, the property tax rolls for the next year went down another $2,000. And then another $2,000 until they were facing literal bankruptcy as a city. So they had to fix all that, and they did a great job fixing it. They don't have these kind of suburban standards, and that's an extreme example. But you're literally keeping parcels from being constructed on if you apply these kinds of standards in the wrong places. This is a lesson about how to calibrate standards to what you're trying to get, not about whether one set of standards is right or wrong for every single situation. And if you're trying to do infill, if you're trying to do small-scale housing, you need standards specific to small-scale housing. Here's the same thing in reverse. How much land do you really need for a small building? All the land on here that is not associated with the building and some reasonable setbacks for life safety reasons, which are controlled by the building code, is artificially required. And this becomes an issue when you have a housing gap of hundreds or thousands of units. Because where's it going to go? I kind of have this, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but sometimes I say the motto we need to have as housing advocates is just kind of, hey, scooch over. Okay, like it's movie night, we're all trying to watch TV from the same couch as a family, right? We've got to make a little room here. And it's usually just our codes that are preventing this from happening. Like once you see the matrix, you'll walk around, you'll drive around, and you'll notice how much extra space there is that's not being used. And I picked on bankers, but bankers have this incredible tool. Every single project on there, by federal rules, is just one house. That's stupid, isn't it? Like you can see the screen. There's a house, a duplex with an ADU, a fourplex. We call them those words, but the federal underwriting guidelines for regular residential mortgages just calls them houses. Just a house. As long as they're on the same piece of property and they're under the same ownership and they hit the conforming rules, 1 to 4 units is just a house. And you can get it with a residential mortgage. How come our rules for zoning and land use aren't aligned with something like that? Right? Wouldn't that just make it easier? I'm not saying that like the threshold in the federal guidelines is right or wrong in this abstract moral sense. I'm not saying that the way we want to do things compared to the federal underwriting guidelines for mortgages is right or wrong in some abstract or moral sense. I'm just saying it would be a lot easier for the people who want to do small-scale projects if they were in alignment. And we can control the policy, and we can put it in alignment. We can do that in our city halls, at city council meetings. We don't have to go to the feds to get the rules changed to align them. So here's the crazy idea. If we could do all that stuff, what would happen if we could pre-approve building programs with it? What if they went together? Maybe we could do other things too. Maybe we could pair developer training with pre-approved building programs and mentorship. Maybe we can pair subsidies for the right properties in the right locations with the right applicants. There's a lot we can do. This is a force multiplier. And this can actually work. It can be as simple as these old drawings, these hand drawings that we did on the screen. This is no AI. These are my pencil marks. very high production quality. This is the first sketch we did ever thinking about pre-approved building programs, and we wanted to invert the process. What happens if you knew what property you had and you could select, if you could swipe left or right on plans and then just download them? Wouldn't that be just so much easier for people who are trying to do these kinds of projects? And that's what we set out to do. So let's give you a brief history. So way back, we had ancient history not long after zoning was invented. It feels like that. It's like zoning and building codes are just these ancient things, you know, like the stone tablets, right? And God wrote with their finger, you know, these rules that we have to follow. Well, they're really hardly more than 100 years old. And back then, we didn't really have sophisticated building codes. It was, you know, all about sanitation, right? And zoning was really important to get adopted, right? We needed to get zoning done across the country as fast as we could once it got invented, right? And it's kind of become maybe bloated, right? We can at least say zoning and land use is bloated today, but it started from a really good place. And we had to spread it as quickly as possible. And we're at basically the same point with pre-approved building programs. We've been doing this approval by affidavit for a couple of decades. That's routine in building departments. It's not even really worth talking about. It's probably why you haven't heard of it, even if your city or town is likely already doing it. But doing this at a citywide scale is something that is relatively new. There are only a couple of dozen, maybe 3 or 4 dozen programs now across the country that do pre-approved building programs. So the data's not out there. Some programs are total failures, but there are still lessons to learn. Some programs are doing great. Most programs are in the middle. And we talk about this term pattern zoning. We came up with the term and then named our company after it because we realize what we've observed is that pre-approved building programs, you can do so much with them. And if all of that stuff is just under one label, that's kind of like calling a great form-based code just zoning, right? We're not really saying what we can do with it. And so pattern zoning is meant to be the deliberate, the intelligent application of what we can do with pre-approved building programs. And that's what is really exciting. That's what a lot of people are working on today. So let me give you some examples. There are going to be great examples from the other 3 panelists. They're going to show you real stuff from real programs. I think I've worked this out, so I'm not repeating anything. These 4 plans are from Bryan, Texas. Bryan, Texas, you know, fascinating dynamics. 70,000 people in Bryan or so, and then like another 150,000 right next door in College Station, and right in between them, 90,000 undergrads, right? And that's the community. It's 250,000 people, 90,000 of them are undergrads. Fayetteville's 32,000 people are undergrads. You know, like it takes University City to a whole other extreme. But they still like the same kinds of buildings a lot of us like, believe it or not. I mean, like these kinds of things are charming, and these were based on 19th century cabins that were already in the town from the images we showed. And the reason this is powerful is because you have a variation on a theme, and it works out. And I want to talk about this because one of the first questions people ask about pre-approved building programs is, hey, well, isn't this going to make all our neighborhoods look the same? Like, we talked about that already. There were songs written about the ticky-tackies. That's not what we want to do. But if you look at this, you don't get that same sense, right? And I like to ask sometimes, do you think every main street in America looks the same? You know, it's kind of a trick question because they do, don't they? But they're all charming. And it's like nobody's been to Paris and said, I hated it, all the buildings are the same. Right? There are these 2 different kinds of sameness, right? There's stuff that is too much the same, and then there's the variations on a theme that is actually quite charming. And I'd suggest to you that variations on a theme is like the fundamental first principle of placemaking itself. And if you can nail a variation on a theme, you've got a hook. You can have a real placemaking strategy. And pre-approved building programs can fit into that. Here's a rendering. These are all buildings that were part of the Ohio Pattern Book. What blows my mind, even still, is that there are only 2 building plans in this picture. They look different. And I'm being a little facetious. We did 2 plans, and then we did some variations on the floor plans, on the facades. On the right side of the street, we did 1 single-family building. And those are the variations of the single family building. And all that is a different kind of porch and different colors. It's amazing what you can do with one or two simple changes. On the left side are the duplexes. This right in the foreground, that's a duplex close to the street. That's the stoop version, and this is the porch version. But they're the same duplex. You can do really cool things like this with a pre-approved building program, even with a small portfolio. Now, there is kind of a Goldilocks zone for how big your portfolio should be. This is rooted in actually customer psychology. Like, people need a certain amount of choice, but they don't need too much choice. Like, imagine I'm visiting Kansas City. I've got to choose a place to go to eat tonight. If there are too many options, I'm going to feel like I can't make the right decision. And if there aren't enough options, I'm going to feel like I just have to settle for something. Right? And it doesn't matter how good or how bad any of the restaurants are. It's about the numbers. There's a psychology here, and it's the same with pre-approved building programs. So your ideal is 8 to 10 floor plans per building type, so that you can give people that variety. And we learned that after our Bryan, Texas program, which wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. We were so proud of that program. I mean, do I have an image here? This triplex is from that program. That's a triplex designed to fit in single-family neighborhoods. Everyone that showed up to a town hall, and we did these things in like high school gyms, was telling us, you did it. You listened to us. You came back with stuff that shows that you listened. We'd love to see this in our neighborhood. Well, a year later, nobody had built these. And we want to know why. And they said, well, we love it. We'd still love to see it in our neighborhood. It's just not perfect for me. And they didn't have another option. They either had to modify this plan or do a custom design. So you needed more floor plans. Here's a walk-up apartment that's been pre-approved. Every version in the rendering you see in the background, we have these grayscale versions. They're all on the same floor plan, the same chassis. This is one building plan that can be constructed with different options. Now, if you want something like this in your pre-approved building program, and everybody does, this is where we're going, you've pretty much got to get your state law changed. Oklahoma's great. We pre-approved buildings just like this in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma allows you to treat multifamily buildings, as long as they're smaller, with the residential code. So it's like this hack that gets around it. And if you have a way into your state house, if you can bend the ear of your legislator or somebody in the governor's office, this is the number one thing you can do to make pre-approved building program work better. Get small apartments into the International Residential Code and out of the big kid International Building Code. Okay. Every consultant loves a 2x2 graph. This is the moment. I'm kidding. I don't have good jokes, but I have jokes. Okay, so here's the deal. You can do pre-approved building programs a lot of different ways. We've done them a lot of different ways. When we've got a client who wants to do a cool thing for the right reasons, we'll bend over backwards to figure out how to make it work. Some of these programs are ours, some are by colleagues, some of these are DIY programs. Okay, and I'd love to do a gig with anybody in here. But what we're here to do is make sure that if you do a pre-approved building program, no matter how you go about it, it's as good as it can be. And that's where we start with this. So you have some choices to make if you're going to do a pre-approved building program. Where are you going to get the plans? And how are you going to transmit the plans? So in general, there's nuance, but there's a short talk. In general, you can get the plans, either you can have them created from scratch for yourself, for your city, or you can source them out of a catalog. Okay, either way, all those plans still have to go through permit review. They still have to hit that magic pre-approved status. So the sourcing is a little different, but the process is basically the same. There are pros and cons. Custom designs are more expensive up front. Catalog designs are less expensive up front, and you can start faster, but you may not get exactly what you want. If you've got wacky codes, you might not even be able to adopt catalog source designs. The other thing is, are the plans free or are they available for retail? So the cheapest, fastest way to get a pre-approved building program done is to put out a call for a design competition with architects, get them to put in some plans. It's all mission driven, and then you just direct people who want to use the program to go buy the plans from whichever architect they like. And a lot of West Coast programs do that. Now that's a friction point, right? You're not making it as easy maybe as you could, but maybe you don't have the resources to make it as easy as you could. This is totally reasonable to do, okay? But it does mean you're not lowering that last barrier, right? If you can make the plans free so that the end user doesn't have to pay for the plans, that's one more thing that's encouraging people to use the program. And there's good reasons to encourage people to use the program, right? I mean, if the program's working, it should take you like 1/10 the time to clerk a permit out of the program than it should a conventional permit, right? Even if you're only looking at it from the lens of, like, how do I manage the budget my city council gave me for this division? If nothing else, this is one of the best reasons you could do it. Because there's really only two ways to clerk permits faster: hire more permit reviewers, or change something about the system, right? This is one way that you could change the system and get a lot out of it. Okay, here's that resource I mentioned earlier, this pattern book we did for Ohio. There's the link, housingohio.org. You can download the plans if you want to look at them, but you won't have a license to use them, but you can look at them. And you can check out the book. Now, the reason why we're so hot on this book, it didn't make the main chapters. It's the technical appendix. This book is set up for cities and towns to DIY their own pre-approved building programs. Our mission, we're chartered as a public benefit corporation, which means we have to identify a mission in our corporate charter that we put ahead of profits, or at least on an equal playing field with profits. And for us, that's solving housing. And so we put this thing out with our partners, the Ohio Realtors and the Greater Ohio Policy Center. This is out for free. And it's structured: what zoning codes do I need for pre-approved buildings? Here are some plans that I can pre-approve if I'm an Ohio town. It's all together in the same book. And then the appendix here is a work plan to actually implement a pre-approved building program if you work inside City Hall, right? There's a checklist, there's a roadmap, there's guidance on how to talk to the fire marshal and the building permit reviewers and city council, how to form your work group team. It's a very practical guide based on the work plans that we've implemented with cities around the country. And in Ohio, you might want to do this here. If there's a group of you today and you're serious about implementing one of these programs, do what Ohio did following up on this. 10 communities have just formed of themselves a community of practice. That sounds fancy. It's got capital letters. There's probably been something of a letterhead, but it's just them getting together and sharing their progress on implementing a program with one another. There are 2 cities in the community of practice that are doing building permit reviews of the plans in the book, 2 of the larger cities. The rest of the towns are waiting to see the results of that because they don't have the resources to spare, right? So they're leaning on one another, and it's working out really well. I'm really excited. They've only been at it for about 2.5 months, but I think they're going to get a couple of programs done out of it, and that's what we wanted with the book. The book says Ohio, and the plans aren't licensed for anywhere else, but you can use the guide. If you can figure out how to procure the plans and you want to DIY one of these programs, or you want to pull together a procurement to do one of these programs with us or somebody else, that's not why I'm here, check out the book because it'll give you everything you need to get started. Okay, here is an image. This is called an S-curve, and we're going to wrap up by talking about where this is going and what we can do. And what I will say to you right now is that we're right at the end of the innovators cycle, or the innovators stage. And let me explain what I mean by that. So this S-curve, or this adoption curve, if you really want to get nerdy, you can look up keywords adoption science. And this is the curve that represents how technology gets adopted in the marketplace, in the public. And this applies to everything. This applied to radio and TV and Facebook and cars and electric lighting, and the list just goes on and on and on. Any new technology. And we divide it up into these quintiles, these 5 groups of users, because these represent different risk profiles, okay? Here's what I'm going to tell you is, you might not want to be one of the very first towns to do a pre-approved building program. Maybe you do, but your mayor or your city council doesn't have that kind of appetite for risk. Maybe the community that's out there needs education and convincing, the respect of public engagement before they just take the idea on trust. Whatever it is, maybe you might have very good reasons for not wanting to be one of the first towns and cities that does a pre-approved building program. But you probably don't want to be one of the last, right? Because any city around you, any town around you who has a more convenient, a genuinely more convenient way of doing good small-scale housing, of doing good infill, they're going to get the people who have the pioneering attitudes and the gumption to do those projects. And you're just going to be waiting for them to come back around, right? And unless your environment can be just as convenient and just as easy for the good stuff, they're never going to come back around. You don't want to be last. Maybe you don't want to be first, but decide for yourself, where in this adoption stage, which one do you fit in? Which one does your city fit in? And you might want a different kind of pre-approved building program depending on what you self-assess as your profile. Right? You might want a wait-and-see approach. You might want to combine features from different programs that you look at. Or you might be ready to jump in. You might be ready to frame your program as an experiment, as a pilot, and you're going to check back in it because you can't wait on housing challenges and you've got to get some progress started now. You have to build momentum so that you'll have the energy when you need it most. So there are different rationales. None of them are right or wrong. The reason I go to such trouble to explain this is because pre-approved building programs, they're still new on the time scale of municipal government, right? But they're old enough now that we're in rooms like this talking about it. Every planner in the country that keeps up with best practices and has been asked to write something like a master plan or an implementation plan or whatever we call it, they've put pre-approved building programs in as one of their implementation steps. It's happening nearly everywhere. It's spreading like zoning spread. Zoning also followed this adoption curve. So we're right at the beginning. We're learning a lot of lessons as we go. These are the lessons we've learned so far. What we think are the best practices. What makes a program better than other programs. One of the big ones that surprised us is this one at the bottom. Doing a program citywide instead of over a special district makes a huge difference. We have a direct comparison of this. You're going to hear Overland Park's numbers from Leslie in just a few minutes. Overland Park has had 3 times the planned downloads in the same period as Fayetteville, Arkansas, okay, where I live and work, where we've bent over backwards to do a hometown plan, a lot of extra mile work on that program, but it's only over a small area. Overland Park covers 80,000 parcels with their program, and Fayetteville covers 3,000 parcels with their program. So it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. So figure out how to address the special areas in your community, but not at the price of neglecting the city as a whole. It's really important for these programs if you want to get full use. I'm going to give you a couple of case studies to wrap up. I first interviewed Scott Johnson, the director of the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center, almost 3 years ago now. This is now called just the ADU Center. They've dropped Napa-Sonoma because they've been so successful. Every other county government, every other municipal planning organization, every housing-conscious legislator in the state halls of government of California wants to expand what the ADU Center has done statewide or even into other states. So they've been very successful. They started out, they were kind of like the pirates of pre-approved building programs. They would just watch the building permit rolls across 15 jurisdictions, and if they saw an ADU get approved, they'd go, yep, that counts as pre-approved, and they'd put it on their website, and they'd say, this one was pre-approved, here's the architect, go talk to him. And some of the building permit officials were a little pissed off about that. And it took them a couple years of education, but they were mission focused and they got through it, and now all those programs are sanctioned and they maintain that inventory of pre-approved building programs the same way they did at the beginning, but now it's sanctioned. But the remarkable thing is that for 5 days out of every week, 3 of them they spend doing case management with people who want to build ADUs. They only spend 1 day managing their pre-approval program, and they spend the 5th day doing admin. 3 days are spent face-to-face, eye-to-eye, helping people with pro formas, with contracts, et cetera, and that's what makes a difference. That's why they get 180 ADU permits through their program a year. That was 3 years ago when I did those interviews. You can see a live version of what we do at this website at the bottom for Overland Park. We're getting ready to release one for Rogers. This is the next gen. This is what we're really starting to think of as where pre-approved building programs can go. Because this isn't just a place to download plans. I'm not going to show you a demo, but you view a map, you click a parcel, and you only see the plans that are pre-approved for that parcel. So it's one thing to like being given a 3-ring binder or a network address and you have to look through all the plans and then look through the zoning code and figure it out, and then maybe you get it wrong, you have to go back a few times. It should be easier. It's easier for me to like deposit a check over my phone than it is in most pre-approved building programs to see what plans are available. It should be at least that easy, and it is here. You view any property in the city of Overland Park on a web page like this, you see only the plans that are pre-approved. Okay, last slide. Why is this up? I started putting this slide at the end of all my talks after I gave a talk in Chapel Hill almost 2 years ago. And they thought I was so silly that I was delighted that the fire trucks were blue. I don't know, it's like I didn't really grow up in the country, but they thought something about me. I had never seen a blue fire truck. Maybe y'all have never seen really a blue fire truck. They're not common in Arkansas. And I just had this thought, if you can just change the rules to make fire trucks blue and blow my mind, why can't we change the infill rules? So thanks for having me. I'm excited for the rest of it.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for that great presentation. We'll hear more from him later, so save your questions for the panel.